Something is going on at Nintendo. At least that's according to Nintendo's own report after we are starting to see some information come out from this annual gathering of the shareholders. Typically, investors will come in, ask Nintendo all kinds of questions about the company as it is now and future plans throughout this new fiscal year. But in one of those reports, there was mention that Nintendo was spending quite a bit of money right now, and it is leading people to wonder, are we getting closer and closer to that big Switch Pro or Switch 2 reveal? Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Now, I know people are quite fatigued on the idea of a Switch Pro. However, this report is actually tangible because it's from Nintendo themselves and people are looking at it, questioning it, and you're going to see it pop up quite a bit, I would say, on YouTube and on other news sites as they look into this further and further. And you may even have different sites like Bloomberg or Wall Street Journal go a bit further than that even and maybe start to ask around with some of these suppliers like had happened with that Switch OLED where we knew it was going to be an OLED screen ahead of time down to the exact size because they were able to contact people in the supply chain and figure all of that out. Well, let's head over here to Go Nintendo, where they say Nintendo's raw material costs have ballooned in 2022, fueling hardware speculation once again. In fact, they are comparing it to 2019, and that's because the Switch Lite came out in 2019, and that was like the last large amount of money that was spent by Nintendo on raw materials. Turns out the Switch OLED at that time when that was released, not as much money in terms of raw material was spent, I guess, than the Switch Lite, which I guess the Switch Lite, because it was a different concept in the sense that it wasn't switching, so they had to do a bit more work to make sure that was correct, right? It didn't cost as much money. Either way, they're comparing it to 2019 as the last time Nintendo spent that kind of money on raw materials. In 2022, Nintendo's raw material costs are more than double that of 2019. That's right, twice as much. So obviously, people are looking around saying, well, does that mean Nintendo is about to release some sort of new hardware, a Switch Pro as a refresh for the current system, or are we about to make the push into the next generation system from Nintendo, maybe in the 2023? I'm still kind of on the side of Nintendo may want to have this generation be a bit longer and maybe even kind of do away with the idea of just console generation and cycles that we have become accustomed to. Maybe they go more in the direction of what we see from phones and tablets, and we just have new Switch systems come in with older ones getting retired, and that's kind of it. Every couple of years we get new iterations of the system. However, we haven't really had that necessarily in terms of more powerful systems. It's just been form factors or other things like the screen becoming a 7-inch OLED display, right? So in this case, if Nintendo did make a push for a more powerful system, that would be really the first time they've done that so far with the Switch line of systems. But they do a lot of revisions for their handhelds. The Switch technically is both a home console and a handheld, so you could make the case, an argument that, yeah, they will eventually do a new Nintendo Switch, and we all figure there will be new hardware coming at some point. Would it be coming at the end of 2022 as their raw material costs are as high as they are currently? Not necessarily. And the reason I want to bring this part up is because it does sort of throw cold water on the idea of this really exciting Switch Pro system. I mean, the one thing we've talked about a lot, especially recently, is the supply chain and everything going on with the chip shortage has just increased prices across the board when it comes to getting these raw materials, even down to something as small as a chip that would do power regulation. We've heard that's gone from as little as like 25 cents up to like $1, like quadrupled in price. And you might be thinking that's 75 cents more. That's not that big of a deal, but that's just like a small chip that would deal with power being diverted to the battery or cutting around and charging or anything like that. And it's just a small thing that's quadrupled in price across millions and millions of systems. Then you think about the Tegra chip that's inside of it and everything else that makes the Switch work. Yeah, you would probably see raw material costs like balloon completely just because of this chip shortage and this supply chain disruption. Nintendo themselves have said that that is a problem. Like they are working around it. They're not immune to it, but they are at least having some success with the current systems that they've been able to build to at least navigate this as well as they can. But the Switch, the number of systems that they are shipping out is declining, and a lot of that has to do with them just having a hard time getting the parts, which means they'll have to bid more for those parts to kind of keep things even rather than just fall off a cliff completely in terms of the number they're able to put together and then ship. But do I think that would be enough to have them double up the raw material costs from 2019 when they built a Switch Lite and shipped it out that holiday? It's really hard to say, to be honest, just because none of us are ordering these raw materials in the background by the truckload. So, like, if it really did balloon this much, that's all it would be. But if Nintendo was building out some sort of Switch refresh or a new Switch system for the next generation, I mean, yeah, it would also balloon it that much because typically these companies will spend the money to put these systems together, and then they'll obviously sell them to make money back and then continue the cycle to keep pushing more and more systems out there. So it's really hard to say, but this is like an actual tangible report from Nintendo that could be alluding to them building out some sort of new hardware. And you know what? The Switch Pro fatigue is so high right now that I would prefer for them just to announce it and get it out of the way. But as we know with Nintendo, they would rather wait till like 2 or 3 months before it releases to make that announcement so they don't kind of mess up a quarter for their overall fiscal year. But let me know what you guys think about this down below. Do you think these heightened material costs and the amount that's being displayed in their reports, double that of 2019, is reflecting new hardware, or do you think it's more or less telling us, yes, the chip shortage and the supply chain disruption really is costing us that much? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.